Hello, welcome back to another video. Today we are making butter and I'm doing it 3 different ways today so that you can see no matter what equipment you've got at home, you can probably make butter for yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I would probably say that using an electric whisk is probably like my least favourite way of doing it, but it's definitely the most accessible. So just get your cream, so it's just double cream, give it a bit of a shake. One thing that I didn't really do before when I used to make butter, but I do it every single time now, letting the cream get up to room temperature, or at least like closer to room temperature. You don't want it like fridge cold, is basically the crux of this. So I'm going to get into this and definitely put some music on or something because this is going to be loud. So you can see that this is mostly now like a whipped cream kind of consistency, and then it's going to basically go to like a heavier whipped cream, like much thicker, and then it will probably separate out more into like solids and liquids, and which will be essentially your buttermilk and your butter, and then the butter will sort of like start to condense together essentially, but you'll see. Keep going with me. So one thing that I sometimes will then do when I use the electric mixer, obviously it tends to kind of go like around the bowl, so I will just kind of scoop all of that back into the middle, especially once you start getting to this stage where you know you can see that it's starting to form sort of like solids and liquids, purely because at this point obviously you don't want to end up with bits that don't get included and don't get incorporated, as I tend to find that gives the butter like a bit of an odd taste and it can go rancid a lot quicker. So back to it. This is now kind of spitting everywhere. So you can see we're kind of getting this like solid lump of butter there. So then now what I'm going to do is basically just drain out the buttermilk, but obviously save that when I do it, so that then I can use it in other recipes. So you can then sort of like squeeze this out and get even more. So now I will just grab, my hand is like literally covered anyway, so I just sort of like scoop out any of the solids. Sorry, my neighbour's really loud at the minute, they're doing a lot of DIY. Now that we have the buttermilk separated out, we're then going to rinse off this butter. So you can either do this with iced water, or because we live in the UK, the tap water is cold enough, to be honest, to just do it straight from the tap. that is now pretty much all rinsed out. Now, if you're really trying to keep your butter for a long time, then rinse out as much as you can. Equally, I am probably going to use this fairly quickly. Or you can freeze it as well, so you could always do that, but I will probably use this quite quick. I'm just going to wash my hands because I'm really sensitive, and having all the butter all over my hands is really bothering me. So that is now one method done, and honestly what I do, this is probably like an extra step that I've seen. I don't really see a lot of people doing this, but I tend to just put that butter onto a bit of kitchen roll, sort of pat that down. I find that I don't do this too much because otherwise the butter sort of like the fat comes off and you end up with like kitchen roll in your butter, which obviously you don't want. But I tend to find that it just helps get out a little bit of that extra like water that was just sort of like on the surface or something. And then I just get a bit of baking paper, and then at this point you can then either add like salt, garlic, herbs. You could literally add anything you want. So obviously if you're making salted butter, you'd add salt at this point. Don't add the salt before, just add it now once you've made the butter. I don't tend to add the salt at this point, I add it, so if I'm having like butter on toast and I wanted salted butter, I would just add a little bit of salt on the top rather than adding it into the butter, purely because I use the butter for a lot of different things, and normally the recipes I use tend to call for unsalted butter. That is the first lot of butter, all done. On to the next one. So now for the protein shaker method. So you just grab your protein shaker, again grab your cream. Again, it's better if it's like more room temperature than fridge cold. So you're then just gonna add that into the protein shaker. Make sure the lid is on and that bit on the top is closed. You obviously don't want to be shaking this and having cream going everywhere. I haven't actually done that when I'm making butter. I have done that though with like a protein shake. I was shaking it once and ended up just it was flying all over the place. So make sure that all of that is closed properly before you start shaking, and then prepare for an arm workout. That's how long it literally took to get to whipped cream. So you can tell because it sort of ends up like, it feels like you're not really shaking anything. And it's once it gets to this point, I end up doing a lot of like this and like flipping it around, and yeah, because it doesn't really feel like you're actually shaking anything. It feels really weird. If you don't have it at room temperature though, it's going to take you a lot longer. Save yourself some time. Like just leave it out for a couple of hours. It's not going to go off. It's not going to, nothing's going to happen to it. It's absolutely fine. But it makes it so much easier when you're then turning it into butter. So let's carry on. Makes you feel like a bartender, like cocktail. Takes me back to my bartending days. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, this method is a workout. Like, my arms are already aching. I forgot how much I really didn't miss this. The effort is worth it though. I find it gives a much nicer butter than with the electric whisk. So it just depends how much arm muscle you're willing to put in really to get it like a bit nicer. I'm gonna finish this off camera because I'm getting really tired. So I don't know if you can hear, we're starting to go back to like a liquid, which is good. So that, what you can hear there, that is like the buttermilk and the butter. And then what I find is, because it's in the protein shaker, getting the, sorry, I'm out of breath doing that. I really need to go to the gym. But I tend to find that you can then use the spout and really easily get the buttermilk out. Not like with when I was using the bowl with the electric whisk and having to sort of like hold the butter so that it didn't fall out. It's so much easier with the protein shaker. You just open it up and get the buttermilk out. So let's do that and then rinse it off. And I don't know if you could see, I almost find when it's done in the protein shaker, everything is combined a lot better, and you end up getting like just like one solid lump of butter. Also, it's so much easier with that spout to get all the buttermilk out. Okay, I think I've got enough buttermilk out that. So then we're just going to rinse this out. So then make sure it's cold water again, and then we're going to rinse it out exactly the same as the last method. If you leave it in the fridge, it'll probably last like, I feel like I've had it last in the fridge for like a good month, but I would honestly like just keep checking it, because sometimes it can vary because it depends like how much buttermilk you end up being able to squeeze out, and it depends on like the actual date on the cream that you use. So all of this is exactly the same no matter what method you use. Second lot of butter. So using the butter churner is honestly probably my favourite method now. Oh god. Yeah, that I'm a bit clumsy. Honestly, last week it was the lentils and the pantry organisation, and this week it's the cream. But let's get cracking with this. So you then just sort of attach the lid onto there, and then you can see that that handle then spins these cogs, which then turns, I don't know what they're called, like paddles, turns the paddles at the bottom I guess, and then you have like a handy little like handle on there, and then you just turn away and get churning really. It's typical. The one time I actually filmed this, it's taking like ages to even get to whipped cream. Normally it's at whipped cream by now, so let's just keep going. We're finally getting somewhere. So that is now turning to like a much thicker cream. So I can feel it when I'm pushing the handle. I don't know if you can actually really see that well inside there, but that is now like a much thicker cream. So I don't know if you can now see, so we're starting to get sort of like these solids. Oh, fly, go away. So we're starting to get these like solids forming, and that's the butter basically. So I can really start to feel on the handle that it's getting a lot thicker, because you can see we've got like the clumps of the butter forming. It'll get to the point where I like really can't turn this handle. So you can see we've got these like clumps of butter. And then that is pretty much finished. So we're gonna strain out the buttermilk and then rinse it off again, exactly the same as with the others. So I don't know if you can tell, I'm drastically losing daylight at this point. So just want to get this done. So again, exactly the same. I'm just squeezing out some of that excess water, but just peeling the kitchen roll off very carefully so that I don't then get any tissue on the butter. Lovely, getting my arm in it. And remember, it's at this point that you would add salt or anything like that. When I do it, I just tend to sort of like add the butter into a bowl and then just add anything else that I'm wanting to add into the bowl with it, and then do it that way. And there we go. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed. That was 3 different ways to make butter. And as you can see, it's range of equipment used. I don't think the butter churner was too expensive. I think it was just, I mean, if you're not going to use a butter churner regularly, then yeah, fair point, don't pay like 30-40 quid for a butter churner. But personally, it was just something I really wanted. It was a gift anyway, and I absolutely love it. It just so happens, of course, the day that I'm filming, it takes ages for the butter churner butter to come together. That's just the life. So yeah, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learnt something. And if you have any questions, or if you make butter and you make it a different way, feel free to drop it in the comments, and let's see how everyone makes their butter, I guess. I'm sure most of you will probably just get it from the shop. But sorry, my neighbours are doing DIY. I'm trying to sign off this video here. Can you please? So I'm probably going to be using a lot of that buttermilk for my lemon pancakes recipe. It's not my recipe, it's one that I found online, but I've sort of like tweaked the ingredients a bit, so maybe you can say it's more my recipe now, but equally don't want to take credit from the original. So I will probably make those in like one of my next videos. So yeah, stay tuned for that to see how I use up the buttermilk. Equally, you can freeze it if you're not wanting to use it at any point. I know people then use it for like buttermilk fried chicken and other recipes that use buttermilk. Personally, I just end up using it all in these pancakes because they're like a pantry staple for me at the minute. So yeah, but anyway, I hope you have a great weekend and a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye.